Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order at 4:03 p.m. We've confirmed that we have enough members present for a quorum. So, do that. We have 6 members in attendance when we started, and we have. Hey Juan, how are you? We have Juan Salva and 24 committee members online. So welcome everyone on that. And in terms of Zoom, I don't see anyone else on Zoom. We also have some other people in the room. So Ben, of course, is here. Can we go ahead? Could you introduce yourself, ma'am?
My name's Tamara.
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 Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Jessica Hira. I'm the tourism manager for the county.
Hi, I'm Holly Manor. I'm the zoning administrator in the growth management department.
So that's all the members we have in the room. We're going to go ahead and ask for approval of the agenda with one minor switch. I'm going to move the chair's comments down to the end. And we've moved some of the other stuff to the end. Since we have people come and present with us and they're taking time out of the day to come, I'd like to go ahead and get those people on the meeting sooner, and then they can finish up if they need to go back and do something. So do we have approval for the agenda with that one minor modification?
Move to approve the agenda as modified.
Okay, moved by Larry Hall,
Second.
seconded by Cindy Sanders. Is there any comment? There's no discussion. We'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, the same sign. So that passes unanimously by the people here who can vote.
Mr. Chair, there's one member of the public
Okay,
online.
did they come on just recently?
Yes.
Okay. So are they showing up in your Zoom list? Or
They are.
Okay, because they don't show up on my list, so maybe it's not refreshing. So could we have the person who's joined us via the Zoom from a distance introduce themselves, please? Hello, can you hear us, member of the public?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Noelle Mary. I'm a UF student.
Maudie, is that right?
Noelle Mary.
Okay, well, welcome to the meeting. And sometime during the meeting, we'll take a couple of chances for public participation if you'd like to do so. So with that, let's quickly move on to the new business. And so Jessica has introduced herself. She's with the Alachua County Visitors and Convention Bureau. And to refresh your memory, the reason we asked her to come is to have a tourism conference that was held out here. And I think IFAS Extension for Alachua County was a co-sponsor of that. So we wouldn't get any updates on that. I think one of the interesting issues that the committee might be interested in, you've had the conference now. What's the next step in the process? So welcome.
We did have a request from Blake Baker.
Holly, when you go
For scheduling purposes.
Okay. Okay, so we'll switch. We can have Holly.
No, sorry about that.
And
Thank you.
Holly's here for the questions you were having with tourism events, overnight stays in the rural and incorporated areas of Alaska.
Yes, thank you. I apologize when I had told Ken that I would be able to come. I didn't realize tonight was my daughter's first softball game. So for the season, so I appreciate you guys working with me to swap around a little bit. I am just going to share a little bit of what I shared at the agritourism conference. Some of you may have been there, may have heard that, so I'm probably repeating myself a little bit. But we'll go ahead and get the kind of the regulatory stuff out of the way. I'll just give you an overview similar to what I did then, and then if you have questions, we can get into any questions that you might have. But just generally speaking, as far as agritourism goes in Alachua County, and we've got some handouts going around. we have had since about the 2011 comprehensive plan update. We had, when we did that, required every 10-year update of our comprehensive plan. At that time, there was a real kind of, I would say, synergy or energy around the local food movement at that time. And it was kind of the first time that we identified through policy support and promotion of agritourism activities in the county. And so we had a lot of interest in doing that. So what we did was we went into our policies for the rural agriculture area. We also, I believe, had policies in our economic element as well about promoting and supporting agritourism in Alachua County. So we've had that since about that time. We followed that up with adding that as a specified use in our land development regulations to say that agritourism was something that the county allowed and supported. And so that was 2011, 2012. And so we had those regulations in place, and we're moving forward with that. And then around 2016, the Florida statutes were amended. Agritourism had already been something that was in the Florida statutes at that time. The definition has changed some over the years as that's gone on, but in 2016 specifically, the state preempted local governments from regulating agritourism with some limited exceptions. So we had that language in our code, but as far as really having any regulatory authority, at that point, when local governments were preempted, that really limited us from doing much else with that, with, as I said, some exceptions that I'll explain. And then, as I've said here, over time, that definition amended, and one of the, I would say, more impactful things that has happened through the years is the addition of these sort of entertainment type, the way the statute's worded, civic and ceremonial events, which, as you know, since that time, barn weddings have become extremely popular, in addition to other types of events being held at event venues that are out in the rural area. So that can be civic, cultural, recreation, different types of events. That kind of broadened it from the concept of it being a U-Pick or a farm tour or a class. It included a larger scope of events. So the next slide, I just gave a copy of the definition, and just one thing I wanted to point out here that is where we do get involved at the local level. It goes through that list of all the types of things that are included in an agritourism activity. But there in red, it does say that that does not include the construction of new or additional structures or facilities that are intended to house, shelter, transport, or otherwise accommodate members of the public. So the way we've implemented that at the local level is to say, we don't go through the development review committee for somebody to do a wedding barn. You're not required to do site plan approval or zoning approval. But if you are going to build a building or renovate a building that the public is going to be in, this still requires a building permit to make sure that it's safe, that you're meeting building requirements. And so while we don't have zoning regulatory authority, we do still implement the Florida Building Code and Florida Fire Prevention Code. So there are things that may come into play there for both entities, both with the fire marshal's office or with our office, to make sure that these buildings are safe for the public. And then on the next slide is just the language about the preemption, and that's in 570.85 of the Florida statutes. And so it's in yellow there, it essentially says hands off to local governments. But then at the end of that, you see that it says it does not limit the powers and duties of the local government to address substantial offsite impacts of agritourism activities. So that's where we do get into some regulation as far as zoning goes when we're talking about impacts to neighboring properties, when it starts to be the type of event or activity on a farm that may extend beyond their borders and have impacts on the surrounding neighbors. So just some kind of key considerations where we are in that framework with the preemption, but then with some of these exceptions that are given. Our key considerations really are that for the most part, these activities can occur with no approval from us. We don't get involved in that. Any new buildings, as I said, we do want you to, and on the next slide, and thank you. We do want you to go ahead and get a building permit, whether that's renovation of an existing building, depending on what you're doing there, or if you're building a new building. So for instance, you may have an existing barn if you want to remodel that barn to add a bathroom or to do something like that, that's where we would get involved in a building permit, or of course, a brand new building. You'd get a building permit and it's treated for the building code as a commercial structure, which means it also has fire review and fire code requirements. Whereas if you were, building a barn or an accessory structure on your residential property, it may not have to have something like a fire alarm or, certain fire code requirements don't come into play for residential where they might for these types of agritourism uses. And I don't want to speak too far beyond my depth, but I will say the Florida Fire Prevention Code also was amended over the years, and they now have sort of a tiered structure where it's based on the number of people that a building can house. There are different levels in the fire code as far as what you have to meet, whether it may be like 200 people and then it's maybe 400 people and above. And so I believe it's maybe 3 tiers, but if you had more detailed questions on that, that would be John Adler, our fire marshal, who also spoke at the conference. So if there's a video of that, I don't remember if there's a video or not of that anywhere, but the fire marshal also has information that he talked about in more detail on that, but that's always a consideration to keep in mind that will apply as well. And then the only other thing that I would say is anything I'm talking about what we do at the county, I'm talking about unincorporated Alachua County. Every city has their own jurisdiction for zoning and for building code. Now we do contract with some of the cities to handle their building permitting for them. So if it was Archer, La Crosse, Micanopy, or Hawthorne, we would still do a building permit. But as far as the things that I say about what we do, what we don't do, I'm just really mainly talking about the unincorporated areas outside the cities. So that's where we are. And then the one other thing that I would talk about as far as those offsite impacts, one thing that we do require at times is a temporary use permit. That's something that can either be, there are a couple of different kinds. One of them is a special event that's designed to be no more than 3 days. So it could be just a 1-day event. It could be a weekend, like a festival or a sale, or then we also have 45-day, they call them seasonal event permits. What that typically is it's not usually on farms. We do have some fall festivals that some farms may do. We used to have Rogers Farm did that a lot, and that's changed hands over time. I don't know if they maybe are starting something back up, but that's one example where they were doing a longer seasonal festival. But typically what we have with that is more like your churches or other organizations that are doing like pumpkin sales or Christmas tree sales, those types of things, or how that's usually utilized. But if you do have a larger event, and so when we're talking about offsite impacts, we're thinking about traffic, excessive noise, things like that. Those are the things where we feel like we need to have a little bit of oversight so we can make sure that we're involving some of these other agencies to look at it and make sure it's done safely. So that would be usually the fire marshal, the sheriff's office. Typically our public works department requires for coordination with the sheriff's office to handle off-duty officers come and do traffic support. And then tourism, we'll talk to them sometimes and coordinate with them. We've had different things, filming events and things. We haven't had any of those on farms yet, but I'm sure we will at some point. So we have the ability through that process to coordinate with some other agencies and make sure that whatever is being done on a farm is being done safely. So that's one exception. It's a $65 permit. It's relatively painless to go through the process to get that. And it's something where we can just make sure we're not letting those activities kind of spill beyond the boundaries and have negative impacts on surrounding properties. Like I said, it's a pretty simple application process. We handle it all online. And again, the fire marshal, if you ever wanted to hear from him, he does, the fire rescue office does also have within the last, I think it's been maybe a year to 2 years, they now have, in addition to that, a special event permit that's specifically for the fire rescue department. They kind of run in tandem. So what usually happens is that you apply for the temporary use permit through our office. And then through that, the fire marshal has an automatic review on that permit. And then he reaches out and says, okay, now I also need this for our special event permit. So that you don't necessarily have to reach out to the 2 departments separately. It handles pretty well together so far, the way that's been working. But kind of just the takeaways, the goals from a county perspective, just to wrap up and see if you guys have any questions. We want to promote and support these activities. We wanted to before we were even told we couldn't, get overly regulatory. We wanted to do that anyway and have done that for several years as a community. We just want to make sure that they're safe. And then we want to make sure that we're minimizing impacts. And so, if I had anything I would say about it is just if you're thinking about doing these things on your farm, or if you know someone that you're talking to that's wanting to do this kind of thing, just think about the potential impacts to neighbors and just try to be a good neighbor where you can and plan ahead and mitigate for those things. We've had events like this. Mr. Mel's even has had, he's done a concert or two out in his community. And there are things, and you plan ahead and you make sure you've got security and you make sure you're providing access in case there was an emergency and different things like that. That's what we're after. And traffic can be, and that's a learning experience. I've had different venues. The permitting process is the same, the statute is the same, but the impacts are going to be very different if you are, Santa Fe River Ranch on 1,000 acres with nobody around you for an eternity, or you may be 10 acres in Jonesville and you're surrounded by other residential neighbors. The impacts of that are different because of the scale and the size of the properties. So it's a little bit, I don't want to use the word subjective, but it requires some evaluation. So really it's best if you're not sure, just have people call us and say, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Do you think I need to get a temporary use permit for this? Or do you think I'm good just under the agritourism statute? And it's a learning experience to just making sure people think ahead. I had my daughter went to one event at a venue that I don't know that it was probably a larger event than they had before. And I sat out on a public road for probably almost 10 minutes just waiting to get in. And I know that had to be very impactful on the neighbors. If I lived in that area, I thought, we want to do this every Saturday night. So, but even that event on the way in, it was a bit messy. On the way out, it was very well organized and efficient. And I thought just thinking about those things and knowing that not everybody that comes to your venue may have a solid plan. So making sure you interact with them, that they're thinking through these things as well. And then I think it's something that can coexist pretty well and support the farm in other ways than just growing the crops or feed the animals and doing those other things that also expose our community that's not familiar with agriculture to get those opportunities to be out on these farms and learn a little bit too. So that's all I have. I don't know if you have questions or thoughts. I know maybe there have been other things y'all discussed that are sort of related to this or not, and so I'm happy to.
So we'll open it up first to the community. Are there questions from the committee for all? James?
I know that you said that it's quite a subjective thing with the temporary use permit. Is there like a people per acre rough idea, or?
We haven't done that. I mean, we've maybe we could. I mean, maybe that'd be one way to look at it. We've kind of grappled with that. I think one thing we've looked at as an example is, if it's one entity, say it's a private wedding, that's one group of people. Whereas if it's an event that's being advertised, open to the public, charging for admission, that could potentially draw a larger crowd. So that's kind of how we've looked at it so far, is it a private event or is it potentially something that's just open to anybody that wants to come? And it's a little bit less, you're a little less able to predict the volume of people in. So you try out a yard sale weekend or something that could potentially grow over the years. And maybe it's that the first year you try it and see, and it's not a huge impact, but if you see that it's successful and it's growing, well, then maybe check with us. But no, that's a good suggestion. It kind of depends on the buildings, the open land, because it
Even just a
tricky
situation, but I just know of so many events that have probably been instances to their neighbors, and I just wonder if there aren't strict guidelines, can there be any sort of accountability measures? Continue to bother neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we would deal with that is that, when we've had something, like sometimes we're made aware of something either right when it's happening or after it's already happened. If we find something to be a problem, we reach out to the individuals and we say, hey, this one probably should have gotten a permit next year. You need to reach out to us, and we're good. We have different This has nothing to do with agriculture, but just as an example, somebody was advertising a run and it was gonna have some impacts on the roadway. Well, the sheriff's office, that's our contact there, he forwarded us that information, was like, hey, just wanted you guys to see this. Some things on Facebook, sometimes somebody will see it, and so we have an ability to reach out to people when we know about something, but if we have a repeated problem, we would deal with that, either through our code administration office or something. We try to find a way that we could get out to there and just have the conversation and try to see how can we do this differently or make sure we're trying to mitigate for some of that where you can. It's hard in a rural area and the sound just
Right,
in
yeah,
some areas, and that could be somebody just hanging out with their friends just as much as it could be, you know, a scheduled event. It's tough. But yeah, continual problems, we would want to address that and have a conversation with the owners.
Other questions from community members?
I have one. So if I'm understanding this, there's no written rules for what qualifies or doesn't qualify. It's kind of up to zoning and the fire marshal whether or not. And if they don't approve it, is there any recourse or that the applicant can follow? And final question is, if they do this without a permit, is there a fine or penalty?
I would say with a temporary use permit, it's less often that we're denying it than it is that maybe they don't apply. And then we find out after the fact. And so we try to, we haven't generally enforced a penalty at this point because we've not had a problem really yet where we've needed to take it to that step. If it's something that we determine does have, I mean, the statute doesn't spell it out. It's not defined that it's this many persons per acre, and then you've got offsite impacts. It's kind of, it varies, like I said, based on scope. But I think what would happen is that we do have the ability, if we determine that something should have required a temporary use permit and it wasn't obtained, and say that goes on for, you know, once or twice or too many, at some point, we have the ability to file a notice of violation of our code for not for failing to apply for a temporary use permit. Because it just addresses, you know, seasonal sales, activities, festivals. It doesn't get into the, I guess our code doesn't get into the weeds of exactly what types of events or numbers of people that we're talking about. So, and we've run into that some, with filming in particular, it's been tricky about which things, like, do we need a permit? Is this a short, I'm going a few hours here with 2 people in a camera. Do I really need a temporary use permit? So we've talked about that we could improve on our ordinance and make it a little bit more specific. It's just, it's tricky when you write code that the more specific you get, you're leaving something out, no matter what you do. And it's just trying to strike that balance.
So any violation of the code enforcement board for hearing. And
Yes, sir. If we felt like they should have obtained a permit and did not, and it became just a repeat problem, that we would have a code officer go out, talk to them, file a notice, and take the process according to the code from there.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little rusty on that state law. I was really diving into it for a while. But I do remember that, it's required, like these wedding venues are required to be on a bonfire farm. Okay, I'm wondering how you're, checking on that, if that is the case. And it also requires that, the income from the farm has to exceed the agritourism.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how you're following up on that.
That is the purview of the property appraiser's office. So what we've done when we've had a question is we contact the property appraiser's office, and there have been times they'll go out and do their own assessment. And then if the property appraiser says yes, under the law, that's what they have authority to determine as the ag classification bona fide act. And so if they make that determination, we accept that.
So it's not being done unless there's a issue.
Well, yes and no. It's not done routinely for every single one. A lot of what we have, at least right now, are typically repeat events, properties that we're familiar with. But what I would say is that from that happening in a few instances over the last year where we've had that conversation with them, I believe what they've said, I think and I may be incorrect, Cindy may actually know better than I do. Do you know, I think they were maybe going to farms around every 5 years to evaluate the ag classification, to follow up and just check in, are they still eligible? I think what they talked about, they're working on potentially trying to go to every 3 years for that evaluation. I know my aunt, they have timber property. I think the county just reached out to them recently to just find out, are you still actively farming the property? Because you do, I mean, we know, just like anything, we have people that are bad actors and that may. Oh, no, we're not, the property appraiser's office has a process that they go through. I mean, they require management plans and things like that. I don't want to speak for them. That's not my purview, but no, they're doing an evaluation of that. I'm assuming the first step is just to reach out to the landowner. That's what they're working toward now. Because I think they were finding just things that were popping up with us that, oh, we may have this farm that we're not so sure that it's really in commercial production. And then, so from that, I just know in conversation that they made the comment that they're thinking they're going to try to go more toward every 3 years doing that evaluation. And I do know also anytime a property changes hands, I think in years past, it might have just kept rolling, but now, I don't know if it was, it's always been that way, where as a new property owner purchases, then they have to reapply.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, now you always have to, I think it carries through the end of the calendar year, and then you have to reapply the following year by the deadline, if it's March or whenever that is, to get the new classification.
Procedure is used to ensure that they are making more money off the farm than they are off the wedding venue or whatever.
We don't have a procedure in place ourselves as far as the zoning office. I'm not sure if the property appraiser is looking at that. What I would say I would expect is that if we had a concern that we thought it was getting to that point, that we would request that information, and we'd have to develop a policy for that. We don't have anything in writing right now. We've not had anything rise to the level that we felt like we needed to do that as of yet. But I think if it was questioned enough, that we would explore that and figure out a way to get to that.
The reason I'm asking this is because I know of one that was started without proper credentials to do so. That to prove that, first of all, prove that they were on a modified farm, they threw a couple of cattle and a couple of miniature donkeys. And that's it. We're not doing anything with those, and breeding and similar, we're not doing anything farming whatsoever.
I think if there was ever a question, that would need to go through the property appraiser's office and just ask them if they could look into it. Since they're the ones that are making that determination. Now on the ag class, as far as the what you said in the statute about the income, and if you ever get it out of balance there where you're really becoming more of a venue than you are a farm, I think that could be our office for the property appraiser to
Well,
look into that.
the law says that it has to be acted that the farm is making more income than the venue, whatever. So it seems like there would be something in place where that is checked periodically through what you say, property appraiser's office, perhaps, or somebody, but
Perhaps
they're not following up on that.
Well, and I'm not sure. I think that would be part of that evaluation if they're making sure they're still bona fide ag. I don't know. I would have to ask them. They're looking at that issue particularly when they're doing these new evaluations. I don't remember how long that's been in the statute. So I'm not sure. I've never heard anybody or had the conversation with them about that determination. But as far as most of those events, like I said, I mean, most of them are coming to us. So we're not interacting with the farms in the way that maybe we used to. We used to have some more. But again, if it was ever something that it seemed like it was tipping that scale, we could then either anybody, I would think, could either go directly to the code enforcement office to pursue it, talk to the property appraiser's office, or potentially talk to us to look into it. Like if you had a concern and you want the county to look into that concern.
Attention to the fact that there should be some, if the law requires that they have to show that they are making more money off of the farm than they are off the venue, and there should be some system set up to check that that is actually occurring, because it's required by the law.
Yeah, if the state required that, it would have been nice if the state had set up a way to enforce that.
So if I could just interrupt for a second, I think that's where the confusion comes in. I just pulled up statute 193-460. And income per se, like you're talking about, is one that is not mentioned. So it gives a variety of conditions identified here, and there's several in there. We can maybe print that for you, but it talks about how long it's been in the use. It talks about the purchase price paid for. It talks about the size relative to the commodities growing. It goes through a long list of stuff, but they basically, the income appears, I only see it twice in that statute. It doesn't relate to, but they identify 7 factors: quantity and size of the property, condition of the property, the percent market value of the property is agriculture, land, the income produced by the property, but it doesn't say it has to be a majority of it. It talks about the productivity of land and its present use, the economic merchantability of the agricultural product, and other such factors as may from time to time become applicable, which are reflective of the standard present practice.
Okay, you're not reading off the actual law.
I'm reading the actual 193,461 of the Florida statute.
I have to go back and read it. I used to know that thing verbatim, but.
It could be in
it's not-
chapter 570 where it talks about agritourism. I was just looking at one section though, and it's just saying, it's language that's saying that you can't, essentially you can't lose your ag classification if you have agritourism. It says, so long as the building, structure, or facility is an integral part of the agricultural operation, the land it occupies shall be considered agricultural in nature. Although I do know if it's a building that is purely agritourism, they do assess that as it's not exempted. The land is exempted, but the buildings are assessed at full value if they're used entirely for agritourism. But I feel like I've heard that before or read it. I just don't remember exactly where. Right, it's not the first time I've heard that. I just don't recall exactly where it is.
I think that, so we had a presentation a while back. from the Producer's office, and it should be in our, so I think that there was a discussion about that being subject.
Yeah, might be.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the disagreements in the rural area is with property tax office. So, you know, the example is the person who's got the wedding, which can be used for wedding, but it's also a big open space and he parks farm it.
Right.
So the producer wants a use value assessment. And the property appraiser may not see it exactly like that way. So you get these conflicts along those lines.
Absolutely.
And it's, so I've been in Alachua County system. And when Ed Crapo was property tax appraiser, he made a big issue about it. He was president of the state association. And there's a lot of court cases and stuff that have to deal with it as well. So it's a very complex issue.
Very, very much so.
So, and if I could follow up with one question. So one of the things in this where I thought you might be interested in this as well. So we did review and make some suggestions on the staycation proposal.
The farm stays.
Farm stays. So, and so there's also some fairly significant things they have to do to be suited for that. But you know, I guess the other enforcement thing that happens is a lot of times people stay for long periods of time more than, you know, just when the concert ends or whatever the event might be, and stuff like that. So that's the enforcement of the sheriff's office or.
If they exceed.
So someone's got a concert, it's supposed to end at 10, and there's people bringing their pants along to someplace that's like that. Is that an issue? Who's that issue with?
It could be, and it's usually in coordination with the sheriff's office and with the code enforcement office because it's tricky. It depends on what it is. The sheriff's office has authority for implementation or enforcement, of the noise ordinance. But the zoning office, the county has authority for the temporary use permit that was issued. So one example, I think we had that one time and I got a call at like 10 o'clock at night and it was the sheriffs that were the off-duty officers on site and said, hey, your name and number was on this. It's 10:15 and it's exceeding. What do we do? And so we started, talking to our code officers and we had a code officer that was going to respond and say, hey, you guys are supposed to shut down. But by the time we even had those conversations, they called back, no, it's fine, everybody's good, we're good, and it was over and done with, and, you know, so far we haven't had those kind of egregious, just, we're not gonna honor this, but yes, I think it would be, if a temporary use permit was issued by the county, we would have enforcement authority. Or if we felt there were offsite impacts, I think we could have some enforcement authority, but if it was a noise issue specifically, sheriff's office would have authority. Again,
Well, it just seems like the rural areas are ripe for some issues like that. The other thing, I just happened to be tuned in when they had some discussions recently on affordable housing. And that touches into the rural community as well. In fact, one guy got up at that meeting, he says, I got some workers here on temporary, I think you can pull it on the ground, so if they want to look for works out there, or if you can't, but I gotta open it. It's like, we don't want to hear that. So there's obviously can be some issues with those type of things. Anything else from the committee? Let me ask, is there, Cameron, do you have anything you'd like to
I
add?
do, thank you for asking. Couple things, just the temporary use permit, or if any of the permitting require property owner to address like portage ons, ADA requirements.
yes, thank you. We do have, typically it's a parking plan, a traffic management plan, health and sanitation plan, so we make sure there's usually like trash receptacles and restrooms provided, and just a general site plan. Some of it I review and make sure of, some of it the fire marshal, like the ADA, that specifically would be part of what the fire marshal is reviewing. And maybe even more heavily so with his special event permit and whatever the fire prevention codes. I know it's been things like, for example, and even with the farm stays, it came up, we had one person so far that came in just to talk about that concept. And so in that instance, there's a requirement, for example, that there has to be a fire, like a certain length of space where a fire truck can pull in and turn around. And so, yes, so keeping aisles a certain, clear a certain way, that's come up even with Christmas tree sales and under the tents and where you can place your tables. And so they do evaluate all of that more so from the farmers.
Okay, thank you. So it's like, because I mean, to some of the other community members' points, that it becomes kind of like sometimes what code enforcement is, which is a complaint generated system. That just seems to kind of, it makes it like for problems, like neighbors are like, and they're like, oh, hey, you didn't know we had that permit, So don't you think there's a way, or is there a way for the county government to utilize the property appraiser's database, and that the county sends out perhaps in the tax bill in the same envelope, just a notice of, oh, by the way, you are legally allowed to do this with your bona fide farm property. However, in the event you choose to have an event, contact our office to make sure you're in compliance with our required codes, so that it's notifying the property owners ahead of time. Be proactive, rather than waiting for the neighbors to call and complain or call the police, and then it utilizes more public resources and wastes money. So to be proactive, contact the property owners and let them know what the county requires, just a heads up. And it might even be a good idea to reach out to municipalities and provide them. I mean, I understand that municipalities have their own code departments, but they do, in sharing education with the municipalities, just share information with Washington County. So just say, I think it would be a good idea to be more proactive with the requirements, so that you don't run into situations where people take the liberty to do what they want, thinking they know that they need to do it, and in fact they have a negative impact on the neighbors. And it could have been one.
Absolutely, thank you. I think that's a very good suggestion. And we've one thing that I've seen just from the zoning perspective in general, one thing that we've improved upon, I think we're not there yet as proactive as that, but we have developed better relationships with the other agencies and making contacts that we didn't necessarily always have. We were just kind of in our own vacuums. And now I feel like I have good people, like if there's a question that comes up and I want to ask a question to the property appraiser, have a couple of people that I know over there that I can call and I'm, we've built those relationships. That makes it easier to do those kinds of things and help one another. And we're better about check with them on XYZ, or they may say, oh, if you want to do this, you need to check with the county. And so improving on that. And I think perhaps, yes, if if they send out notices or something, I think it's just postcard. We have to see if we could tack onto the postcard somehow. But I think that's a great suggestion to reach out and just get that sort of proactive information out there. Various ways. There are lots of ways we could do that. It's one of those things that we put these things on our list. That's great to do, and then the phone rings and then we just. So that we need to be better about that, and I appreciate that feedback. Thank you. That's a helpful suggestion.
Let me ask, are there any questions from committee members online or the guests online?
No questions.
No, thanks.
Okay, not hearing any.
Mr. Chair, there's one other person that's on the phone that came on,
Okay,
that we haven't had any interaction with yet.
okay, can you read the number? I'm too far away.
It's 7394 is the ending of the number. Yeah, we like ask them to.
Hello, 7394. If that's the last 4 digits of your phone number, could you identify yourself and let us know if you got any questions?
Figure out to hit *6 on the phone and then unmute.
Okay, could you try to hit *6 on your phone if you haven't done so and see, and let us know if you have a question or not? Okay, I see your hand up, so I guess maybe.
That's my mouse.
I think it's not a process. Okay, well, there's technical glitches on that, so we're gonna need to move on. One more chance for committee questions. So how can the lost daughter play song?
And I have just a few cards too that I brought that I'll leave with Ken if anybody wants my contact information. Y'all can get in touch with me anytime.
Which may be the most important thing you do today. Root for your daughter playing song.
I hope so.
Not that you don't do things important, but that's important. Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and move on to Jessica. And let her fill us in on the agritourism conference and maybe what next steps.
And I brought some of my information that I presented at the agritourism conference here today to present to all of you. So I'll start going through it, but if you've all seen it already, I'll just skip to the end. And I have cards too that I'll leave for you. I wanted to just give a brief overview of who we are and how we're funded. We have our own dedicated funding source and just how the revenue around tourism is generated, because whenever I have an opportunity, I like to just kind of share the word of what is tourism in Gainesville and Alachua County, and what is the definition of a tourist and all those kinds of things. So who we are, we are a department of the Alachua County Board of County Commissioners. We work to increase tourism and the economic activity generated by our visitors. And we are fully funded, not through the general fund, but we're fully funded by what's called the bed tax. I think the next slide is the definition of what is a tourist by Florida statute. And for the purposes of tourism in Florida, the state statute defines a tourist. So a tourist isn't necessarily someone who spends the night overnight in paid accommodations. A tourist is someone who comes into our county from outside the county of their permanent residence, or who leases transient accommodation. So it's not an and, it's an or. So just for your mindset, if we're marketing things, We always have our marketing going outside the county line. But it doesn't require us to track a heads and beds component or guarantee that our people are staying in hotel rooms. The purposes of them coming here for that event or activity is the generation of tourism in and of itself. So what is the bed tax? In Alachua County, bed tax is 5% of paid lodging. Who pays it? Our hotels don't pay the bed tax. They are required to collect it. But the visitors pay the bed tax. So when visitors stay in any paid overnight accommodations, they pay their sales tax and they pay the bed tax. And this is all throughout the state of Florida. Different counties have different bed tax collection rates, but 5% is the most typical. It is applied to anyone who rents accommodations 6 months or less. So if you have an annual lease with a tenant in a rental home, they are not required to pay that tax, nor are you as a landlord required to remit that to the tax collector. Everyone who has paid accommodations remits. So hotels, motels, campgrounds, even short-term vacation rentals like Airbnbs, they remit directly to the tax collector's office. Our slides are sticky. So how is the bed tax used? That too is governed by the Florida statute. Bed tax is used to promote and advertise tourism in the state of Florida and nationally and internationally. However, if revenues are expended for that activity, service, venue, or event, we have to show that one of the main purposes is the attraction of tourists. And how do we show that? By marketing it to tourists. So where it says in that last line, as evidenced by the promotion of that activity, service, venue, or event to tourists, that's how you're satisfying the state statute for the use of bed tax funds. So I think this is interesting. 63 counties out of 67 in the state of Florida collect bed tax. The ones who don't really have a lot of hotels. So in 2019, this generated over 1 billion of tax revenue to the state of Florida. And so this is one of those common things that people say, we don't have a state income tax because we have so much bed tax. But beyond bed tax, the more important part is the visitor spending that our tourists bring when they come and stay within the state of Florida. So I want to show this just so everyone kind of understands the life cycle of a bed tax. We already covered who pays our visitors, how much is the 5%, how is it generated in this most recent fiscal year. We had just approximately 156 million of paid lodging in Alachua County. So that generated approximately 7.8 million in bed tax. Our board sets the investment strategy for these revenues. So we invest that into capital projects, into grant programs that our office administers, and to the advertising that we generate. And what is the ROI? So the increased bed tax leads to more revenues for the board to invest, which then generates more visitation and visitor spending. And it goes right back into these this life cycle fund. And so I just want to review, where has the bed tax come from over the last 12 years? You can see here, starting in 2018, we started bringing in over 5 million a year. We had these 2 terrible COVID years, like everyone knows about. But I think people would be interested to know it didn't sink to the floor. I mean, even with COVID, we still have lots of reasons for people to visit here, which will be the general business of UF, our hospital system. We have agricultural workers staying in hotels. We have construction crews, people on and off I-75, friends and family visits. So we have lots of people still coming to the county that may not be coming here for you know, a big festival or an event or something. And then as you see in 2022, this is typical. I mean, we're so thrilled with what happened with our paid lodging and our bed tax. It's all over Florida. Every county in Florida has seen this kind of increased bed tax in 2022. And I think really throughout the United States, because people had that pent up demand. They had put off a lot of family travel. They may have postponed those family weddings or events, and those have all come back, you know, so strongly. So this is where we landed this year. So last year we had an independent firm research for us the economic impacts around tourism, and they came back with these numbers that visitors, so this is not all visitation, this is just visitors staying in paid accommodation, generated over 630 million in economic impact to the county. And their actual spending was over 400 million. And that's their lodging, entertainment, dining, shopping, you know, filling up the gas tank, getting their Starbucks, etc. in 2021. We sold over 1.3 million room nights in 2021. And jobs supported by this industry generated over 211 million in wages. And those generated over 61 million in state and local tax revenue. And they came up with this number. They say it saves every Alachua County household $603 in taxes annually. Tap it again. So I just want to briefly share, and then we'll get to the agritourism conference, but we did share this on that day. So how is our bed tax invested? State statute also defines how each of these, we call them 5 pennies, can be used. Each penny is 20% of bed tax. Our first 2 pennies, if we have that again, there it is. Our first 2 pennies, our board invests in capital projects. So that's how we built Champions Park in Newberry. Bed tax went for the purchase and renovation of the equestrian center next door. And we've just pretty much completed construction on the new sports and event center at Celebration Point. So those first 2 pennies of bed tax are now bonded, both to finish up paying the debt service for the equestrian center, and then they're bonded to pay the debt service for the sports and event center at Celebration Point. The middle penny, we grant that money out. So that is all granted to arts, nature, culture groups, sports groups. We have grant programs to attract meetings and conferences that have big room blocks, like Florida Association of Mosquito Control, people like that. So that money is all re-granted back into the community. And then the last 2 pennies are pretty much divided in thirds. About a third goes to the marketing and advertising, a third goes to the Gainesville Sports Commission, and a third pays for the administration of our department and our staff. So we covered all of this. That covers all of the capital projects. That's the sports and event center. I think we have a ribbon cutting scheduled for the end of May. And then this is our grant programs. And then these are some of the groups. It's not a comprehensive list, but just kind of a sample of some of the groups that we support every year. And conference grants, like I was talking about, those are for the big group blocks. We do event sponsorships, so we work with, I don't know, maybe about 20 different groups every year, and they can get up to $20,000 for an event. And this is something I want to talk to you all about too, that just making everyone aware this is available. If you're doing a festival or an event, we do have sponsorship funding available for that. We love to share the application and bring new people on board. And then we operate sports grants as well. And then this is the Gainesville Sports Commission funding. We provide them with administrative funding and then bid pool, and then an additional 6% per bid pool for the sports event center. So they're the contracted agency that does sports marketing on behalf of the county. And so these are kind of our big areas that we work within. We do the marketing. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Well, I'll cover it now. We do consumer industry, we do public relations. You heard Holly talking about the film. We get film companies coming in. We just had, well, about 6 months ago, we had a Netflix film crew that was here for about 3 weeks filming, and they were filming out in Hawthorne. And Holly helped a lot with that because there was a lot of, they needed sheriff support and things like that. We publish the What's Good Weekly Event Guide, and that goes out to about 20,000 subscribers every week. And then we operate our grant programs. We do outreach. So we have a board seat on Natural North Florida, many professional organizations, and then our department actually manages the equestrian center next door. And so we keep that place fully booked in season, and we're trying to do more festivals there, but it's primarily being used for horse shows and dressage right now. So this is just a little overview of the marketing. So if you're thinking of an event or you have a venue, you'd like assistance marketing, we deploy it across all tactics. So we have radio, we have billboards, digital, we do our weekly emails, our website, obviously social media, we do broadcast. Print publications, that's an example of an ad from, I think, about 2 years ago. And then we do the print advertising, and we design it all in-house. So we do the buys, we work with whatever vendor, and we do the ads and write the copy ourselves. And then we have a person dedicated to attracting meetings. And how we do that is we go to trade shows, we meet with meeting planners. We work with all of these organizations that you see on the screen. After this, I'm driving to Tallahassee to go to an FSAE meeting tomorrow. And that's how we, the meetings industry, I'll just say briefly, that's the last thing to come back from COVID. So we all know in COVID, meetings industry was zeroed out. People learned how to do Zooms. When meetings first started coming back, it was mainly hybrid. So now a lot of meeting planners are focused on reproducing their in-person meetings. And we think we have a great market to support that. Most of the meetings we're doing are Southeast or Florida-based meetings. And we have dedicated funding to support those. So that's what that is. And then we do visitor services. So we provide the literature that someone might need to come to the county and plan a visit. We host travel writers. We just had 2 travel writers who are divers, who were in High Springs for 4 nights, diving through some of the caves and going to High Springs restaurants. And then we act as the film liaison for the county. So when we have filming inquiries, we try to help guide them toward places that might match where they want to film, and work with them to get through like their permitting or whatever they need with any of their logistics while they're in the community. And so at the agritourism conference, such as we're transitioning, but this is who presented. You met Holly today. Dr. Sanders presented. John Adler, the fire marshal, presented, and he had a lot of great information just about how he sees things through a safety point of view, that if you're just starting doing one of the barn wedding venues and you want to drape fabric over some beams to make it look pretty, they have had fires coming from that. So getting in touch with the fire marshal is critically important because no one wants to have any kind of situation. And then Alan Hitchcock presented in my. And so we all probably know the definition of agritourism. And on our next slide, what we're starting to do, so this speaks to kind of the next steps. I think anytime we're working on developing marketing around an issue, we start with just developing that inventory. What is the inventory of our available resources to sell, or what are we marketing or advertising? And then who are we selling that to? So this is what we're looking at is we all know we have the venues. I don't have any special information as to whether they are licensed correctly, and that's something I will look into more deeply now that we had this discussion today. But we have our specialty crop festivals. Some of these are already being supported through sponsorship money from our department. So what I was thinking even coming here today is, working with all of you and also with Dr. Sanders to spread the word about how can we get that application into more people's hands and help them in turn reach back out to us and share the great information about what they're producing. And we have our seasonal events. We're coming up onto the youth fair time. We have lots of great agricultural festivals that are already in existence in the county. And then every week, so when I mentioned that What's Good event guide, that's being distributed to almost 20,000 email addresses every Thursday. Every Wednesday at 7 o'clock, we put it on our social media, visit Gainesville.com. So every week we have sections in that publication for the farmers markets, the seasonal U-Picks, whenever Swallowtail is doing one of their farm to tables, or even on that previous slide, any one of these festivals will get featured in that guide. So we're out there publicizing it and trying to attract visitation around it. But what I'm saying today is working with all of you to come up with what is needed, what do you see as the next steps, and just that comprehensive plan. And this I wanted to share because it's almost agritourism adjacent. In typical agritourism, they'll talk about wineries. One of our wineries has a blueberry festival every year. So we did just launch this Alachua County Ale Trail, which we have 7 breweries in the county. And we've worked with all of those breweries to say, help us tell your story. And in doing so, really educate outside public that, yes, we do have 7 breweries. We created an ale trail. We have a digitized passport that people can check in and visit a brewery and get points and then turn that in for merchandise. And we have put some advertising budget behind this, both with digital and radio, and we're doing a billboard for it. So this is this slide where we show our 7 breweries. And I thought this was interesting to share with you all because it's the first time we've ever promoted commodities-based tourism in the county. And so as we're thinking of how commodities-based tourism relates to agriculture and the seasonal crops or farm festivals, I thought this was a good example to for us to watch the engagement around it. We've had close to 1,900 people so far sign up for this digital pass. And we've had 4,700 check-ins at the breweries. So one of the good things about this kind of activity is now we know who those people, we have all their emails and their names. It helps us be able to remarket to them. And so when we're thinking of kind of adjacent activities that people who go to breweries are interested in, whether that's paddling or biking or maybe attending farm to table dinner, we have a whole new source of, we call them targets, but populations to message to when we have those kinds of stories to share from the mountain. And so I wanted to just share this for everyone. And there are so many ways to get involved with us. We are constantly marketing and promoting our venues and events. We have an online calendar. If you email me, we can get your events into the What's Good Weekly event guide, which we're happy to do. This What's Good guide actually was the recipient of a Visit Florida Flagler Award for the best consumer communications piece in the state in 2021. And then we provide sponsorships. So anytime you know someone who's doing an event or a festival, we're already working with Windsor Zucchini Festival, Newberry Watermelon Festival. But anything just send them our way. So that we can provide them an application and walk them through it and help them see whether they're doing a conference. We have one source of funding. If they're doing a festival, we have a different one. If they're a nonprofit and they hold nonprofit status, they can apply for one of our grant programs. And so one thing I was thinking, Dr. Sanders, is getting some of this into your newsletter, because I was thinking that when we publicized the conference, I was thinking if you're open to that, I could do a little article or just do a little link to kind of share some of this to your constituents and say, please be in touch. This is what was covered and these are ways that we can work together. And then for all of you to keep us informed. The sun is coming in.
It's coming right in something. No more.
I gave it to you. I had it for the first half of the meeting.
Okay, questions, Jessica?
No question.
Go ahead, Larry.
I was going to ask, what requirements does a venue have to qualify for sponsorship? And I heard you say at the last, nonprofit, so only nonprofits, political, religious groups don't qualify?
They do not.
Okay, but you're
So
with the breweries, but those are for-profit entities.
right, so we're not, so that's a good question. So we have, we do not provide sponsorships to venues unless they're doing an event. So we don't say give money to the Hippodrome for their venue. We give money for the plays that they advertise and draw an audience for. With the breweries, we're not giving the breweries money. We're working with them to package that and then disseminate the information. So if you think of grants are for nonprofits. Sponsorships can be either a nonprofit or a for-profit. Say the Tom Petty Festival is not a nonprofit, but they are still eligible for sponsorship. When it comes to political events, no. However, we do routinely publicize, say, restaurants. If Spurrier's is doing a special event for Valentine's Day, I want to say they get more than 75% of their patrons from outside the county. Could be any restaurant. We do routinely share that kind of information that is of interest to our tourists. Do we provide them money to do their Valentine's Day dinner? No. So that's mainly the difference. We can market. Really, we fall within the kind of categories of restaurants, attractions. A place like Carson Springs is a nonprofit, so they are eligible for the grant funding.
So a religious organization won't have a concert and bring in a big name entertainer and have a concert and
That would be eligible.
some of the deals.
So we kind of have a line between, it can't go to support, and I know this word is strong, but it's indoctrination into a specific religion. So it would not pay for a religious service, no matter what the denomination. But if a religious entity is hosting, say, a faith-based conference, or like you're saying, there might be a performance, then they could fill out an application.
Other questions, James?
I have so many questions.
Okay.
I'm not really sure where to start,
Okay.
but I think that I'm gonna start broad.
Okay.
For the bed tax,
Yeah.
how is that money like dealt with in terms of like county by county? Is it aggregated? Do we have our own investment strategy? Does the state like invest the money for us and it's just kept separate by county?
It's kept separate by county. Some counties use the state's Department of Revenue to collect the bed tax on their behalf. I would say out of those 63 or maybe 20 do that. And then the other group of counties collects it through a different means. We use the Alachua County Tax Collector's Office to do that for us. Those 5 pennies, the state does say, some counties collect a 6th or 7th penny. Some of those 6 pennies are specifically used for, say, creation of a spring training facility. We don't have that. Other places, it's huge. Other counties have beaches. There's been many attorney general's opinions about how and where bed tax can be used for beach replenishment. Questions like, can I use bed tax to pay for the lifeguards on my beach? Can I use it to pay for patrols of officers on, 4-wheelers on my beaches? So every county is different. Obviously, we don't have beaches. We use those first 2 pennies for capital. The middle penny that we use for grants, it all goes into a budget that's controlled through the county's Office of Management and Budget. And so my department in that way, we're treated like any other county department. We go through the same budget process. We're going through that right now, where we're developing, even like as we speak, we're developing our budgets for FY24. But the big categories, say for that 3rd penny, the board has directed 85% of that 3rd penny is for the arts, nature, culture grants.
Okay.
And so it's just based on collections, and then we'll know, okay, the value of 20%, which is 1 penny, is going to be, say, 1.6 million. And we just reverse engineer. So when I advertise, so all of these grants are advertised when we open up the grant. Those big nature culture grants, those open up once a year. They open up in late spring, and then they're due in usually late July, early August, and then we have a scoring committee, and they get scored, and then their funding is determined based on a combination of their request and their score. And we use objective criteria. So I want to say in 2019, our board directed us to reevaluate our grant programs and really come up with objective criteria that the 2 most important criteria are the budget that the agency is putting into their own programming and their anticipated attendance. So we have a ratio where what we don't want to see is things kind of out of alignment. If you're doing an event that's only gonna have only, but say it has 200 people.
Yeah.
That you're not going to be getting, say, $20,000 for that event. If you're doing an event that is going to have 60,000 people through the year, because you're a major producer, you're the Cade Museum or something like that, and you have a bigger budget, then you're eligible to apply for more funding.
Okay. Is the sports commission Googleable? Okay, I have a list out. I'll look that up on my own. I guess the other kind of large scale question, if it's okay. No one just follow the question time.
Other questions from committee members? Let me go to the online committee members. Jeannie or Juan, do you have questions for Jessica?
No, great presentation. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, no question, thanks.
Hello, go ahead, Juan.
Oh, I had no question, sir. Just thanks for the presentation.
Oh, okay. Do we have any questions from visitors?
I have one, but the committee member, you have a question.
Yeah.
I didn't want to turn to her if she, but if you have a time limit, then I don't have any time.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
James.
let's go for it, and you know, and I'm available to later.
Yeah, you can be vague and also just question too. I guess my question, you know, thinking of Florida and Florida's legacy and how much tourism has impacted Florida's development, especially coming from a farming perspective, I think these are a lot of our resources. And so I guess I'm curious to know what Visit Gainesville and Alachua County's vision is for tourism in the area. If it's like, you know, obviously the agritourism thing makes me really happy, but you know, if we're going to be like, I guess, is there a strategic plan, and what is the like main bulk of what kind of like events or like development might be prioritized?
So let me ask a clarifying question. Are you asking through a lens of knowing other communities are over touristed and kind of the environmental and other impacts that are a result of that? Is that the question?
It's kind of, no, it's more just like, I'm interested to know what kind of tourism we're trying to promote, if it's just whatever tourism comes along, or if there's like a strategic vision for tourism in the county, just because I feel like there has been poorly planned tourism development in a lot of the rest of the state.
Okay. The first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is we are on the verge of fully opening the sports and event center that we just built. So that is a major board investment. When that project first started its development, it was really seen as a sports facility. We had the only indoor banked track south of Birmingham, Alabama. And it's the only indoor banked track in the state of Florida. And this facility has the volleyball, basketball, and all of those capabilities, even pickleball. So when you're saying what kind of tourism are we trying to attract? I would say to you, that's one, just look at the investment. We invested in the facility next door and renovated that. We invested in this new facility. When I think of, and then if you look at the board's annual investment into, we call them nature and culture destination enhancement grants, because how I see it, and I believe how they see it, is that the board being able to invest tourist generated revenue into our nonprofits, and you saw the list very briefly, but we're working with all of these amazing nonprofits that we have a vested interest in supporting, not only for the visitors, but also for our residents. And they create employment. So I think our big areas of focus, you can trace back to those. You can trace it to nature and culture. You can trace it to sports. You saw we're doing our commodities-based visitation. What do people like about coming here? We have 8 state parks. So we have ample opportunities for people to enjoy nature, especially during COVID. That's really what we were quote advertising. We have a lot of people who come here for birding. We're one of the top inland birding locations in the Southeast. So we have people who come to High Springs for the springs and for just the charm. We have people who come to Micanopy to go shopping and go to Payne's Prairie or go to Marjorie and Rolling. So if you're asking me, is there a typical profile of a visitor? There's a whole community of visitors and each one of them has a different profile. I call this intrinsic visitation because it's not something that we're marketing, but it's huge drivers. The University of Florida, parents coming to visit their students. So University of Florida has within it many concentric circles of reasons to visit. You know, you're visiting to look at the school. You're moving your child into their dorm. You're coming to an athletics situation. You're coming to UF Health. A loved one is receiving treatment at one of our cancer facilities. Or we get a lot of people coming for the veterinary college too, and they'll stay while their pet is receiving treatment. We have a lot of people, and during COVID, I mean, one of the things we pivoted to was families were taking to their cars to take their kind of distance. You know, I'm stir crazy. I do want to get out of the house. I know I can't go to Disney right now, but I want to do something. We weren't having meetings like we talked about. So we intentionally tried to pull people off I-75 to stay in our grouping of hotels that we have right there and all the restaurants, because really at the end of the day, if the hotels were finding safe ways to operate their business, we were in support of that. And we were trying to do whatever we could to kind of safely, number one, continue bringing visitors to our community. So that's a brief answer. And I'd love to talk more anytime.
Yeah, I just as a statement that like, I think that Gainesville is attractive for so many of the right reasons. I just wonder, like, you know, COVID was a great reason for us to invest in our natural areas because of visitors and just like for future planning, just like what I guess if there's just strategy for types of things that, or just projects just come up and we decide and in there.
I know we'll be continuing with our grants. If you're talking about kind of our consumer advertising, if that's where you're going with the strategy word, I'm happy to come back another time and
Yeah.
that's under consumer advertising.
Question. Let's invite her back.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, okay.
Tamara, you got a quick.
I'm hoping I formulated some of those points. So what I'm understanding is that tax revenue is only collected through when people are spending a night in a hotel.
Or in a campground or Airbnb or anything.
Oh, okay, but I mean, it's an overnight, like a bed tax.
Correct.
And the bed right?
Yeah.
So is it when there's capital, the first 2 pennies that are invested in capital, is that when there needs to be a provision in the capital investment that shows that it's going to put X amount of heads and beds in order to replenish the money?
That,
Because nobody else is going to a brewery or anywhere else that's benefiting from this program. Those people are not buying beer and paying bed tax, right? So, but it's the capital investment portion, there's two portions of investment. Is it true there has to be a proven that they're going to keep, because I know there was a situation in Alachua when this program invested $500,000 in a park that they built, and there was a contract that said they had to provide so many events, it resulting in so many heads and beds in order to replenish the money. So is that true? It's the capital investment where that commitment comes in?
right, so for example, the operating agreement that we're paying to build the sports event center. We have an operating agreement with our operator to manage the facility. As part of that, they have deliverables to the county. And some of those deliverables are those KPIs, tracking those hotel stays and reporting to us. We're just talking about this, both some reports come monthly, some quarterly, some annually. But when it comes to that facility, how my understanding of it is that our board makes what's called a legislative factual determination that this investment of bed tax into this facility is for the purposes of tourism. How do we prove that? We prove that through tracking those KPIs.
Right, okay, that leaves my question. Can the 5 cents be divvied up differently? Could it change so that there was 3 cents to capital and 2 to the other?
Yes, so that specific scenario can happen. Not every other scenario, so I don't think that the board could say we're doing all 5 pennies to capital. Or so that would be more of a legal question. I do know that you can make 3 pennies available for capital.
Oh, okay, and I'm gonna wrap up to say no more time.
Yeah.
So I'm too, and I'm not sure if it's the same reasoning behind, but I'm concerned about over promoting tourists because the bed tax money that's being generated is going towards promoting the people, mostly people in this county or visiting, going around and using our roads and using the parks and walking the trails and swimming in the. So they're using all the resources and most of the people are driving home, right?
It's about half and
Okay, so say it's 50-50, but at the end of the day, you can over tourism your area and it begins to degrade the situation where the money that's being generated is not being reinvested into what's really being negatively impacted. So, for example, the event center on I-75, I have a real problem with that event center because the only way you can get to it is in a car. You can't fly into Gainesville Airport, get on a shuttle and go out to the event center, right? You gotta either rent a car or take a bus. So those type of comprehensive plannings, like I would like to see the tourism board look broader into what are the activities that you're supporting and promoting doesn't have a negative impact on our community because there's always a negative impact with a positive too, right?
right.
But you can over tourism place it. I'll just give you a quick example. My son lives in Colorado. People say all day long, you go out to the mountains to hike. There is so much over tourism that it has become very dangerous. So just over tourism.
And I appreciate that. I mean, I'll just say, other communities have been dealing with this far longer than us. And looking at, you know, that sort of tension between residents and visitors and exactly what you're speaking to. So, you know, I am aware of that. And I know that the sports center operator, just with that specific example, he is working to put shuttles in place so that when a big event comes, or say it's a gymnastics competition or big track meet. So the good news is a lot of the NCAA or the higher level athletics at the sports event center, the collegiate and above, they're coming on buses, like they're coming from wherever. That will be a team coming on a bus with a coach. Of course, the spectators will be coming in their cars.
I'm not worried about
Um,
team show.
And so, you know, I hate to hurry it up. We do have.
Yeah, and we have to go do my driving too.
But, you know, I think it's a point in happens a lot with economic impact studies. You see the growth in the expenditures of what it does, but there's externalities associated with it.
Yeah,
And it's something that probably definitely needs to be considered in the overall evaluation of return on investment.
I like that, and I do know so many other communities are working on that too.
Okay,
And so I'll bring that comment back to the TDC and we'll discuss that.
okay. And if we have follow-up, we can send you questions.
Yeah, I'd love to reach out independently and
Okay, so we can do that. Let's try to power through the other things. You guys, question is,
Yes. I wanted to know, I'm working with two nonprofit organizations that's promoting horse and pony rides. The organization, what's the company?
I'd have to learn more about it. So I have my cards here too. Yeah, yeah.
okay, so we're gonna try to power through this. I don't think there's a lot of other discussion on this. So Kim, you want to give us a staff update on anything that's wise?
We can just flash that up. I think there's no issues right now. But I will just quickly. Put that. So here's the current report. Everybody's in good standing. Nobody has any issues.
Okay,
So
so we're.
if anybody has questions, they can always ask.
Okay, any committee member have anything they want to bring up or announce or do anything like that? James, out of minutes.
I just want to say thank you so much. That being on this committee has been really great, and it's my last meeting. I've been in a dairy in Virginia for a year. So we'll see what I can learn there. We'll see what I can.
Well, regulations, we're hoping that we get more hands-on involvement, something happened. So, well, missed it, your comments. So we appreciate you being a faithful team. Approval of the minutes for the last meeting, they were distributed by Ken. Were there any additions or corrections? And if not, would anyone like to move approval of those minutes?
I'll move to approve.
So Jennifer moves for approval, Larry Hall seconds. Is there any discussion? If not, we'll go ahead and
Do you take comments on the minutes approval?
not usually, but if you got something real quick.
Quickly, it states at the first that Mr. McClellan began by giving the presentation. I was online at that meeting and I couldn't get in.
Oh.
The system was not functioning correctly. So I did hear his whole presentation. And I think the minutes should include the data that he provided for that small producer agricultural capital support program. I was really kind of alarmed by the fact that well, the good news, there were 43 qualified applicants, but only 3 of them were funded. That's hard to take, just saying, but I think that data should be in the minutes. There were 43 qualified applications from that program, and 3 were funded with a total of $10,000. And so that's why it's a request, and we need to.
So you've heard the comment. Is there anybody who would like to move for amendment to the minutes that just?
I want to the inclusion of the data of the small grant program.
So you're moving to amend approval with that data.
Exactly, yes.
Is there a second to that amendment? Okay, it's been seconded by Ms. Warner. Is there any discussion on the amendment? If not, we first have to vote on the amendment. So all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying aye. Okay, I didn't hear by opposed, so the amendment passes, so the motion, go back to the main motion now. Main motion is that we adopt them with that one revision. in there. Is there any discussion on that? Not hearing any, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor of the minutes at the minute signify by saying aye. Opposed, the same sign. Okay. The next item, and Ken, I don't know, do you have that little thing, that slideshow I put
Yeah.
together? So on March 14th, the committee chair, me as chair, has been asked to come before the commission to do a presentation of local concerns. So I got with Ken, and we've been working on it. He gave me the basic background. I've simplified it a little bit. I'm going to go through it fast. It's a local concerns advisory update. And obviously, if there's something glaring wrong, I'd like to know. If you want to, Ken, we can just go slide to slide. I think people can sit there. Okay, so just do that. I put in the first one is what the responsibilities of the committee are, and that was taken right from the language. So go to the next one. Okay, I want to make sure that the members of the committee were noted and their contributions. So I told who they are, what their representation are, when their term started, and all that different stuff. Next one. Then I've simplified this section quite a bit. I said we're working around the goals and objectives and focuses on 3 pillars of issues concerns: rural health and service delivery, rural economic development, rural policy concerns. So those were our broad 3 categories. Next one. Then I sort of give a brief overview of what issues we've been addressing over the last 12 months or so. So we've had rural law enforcement, pavement management. You see the rural economic development stuff. You see the rural policy concerns. My summary of that's going to be as the group has been focused on and pretty hard on the issue related to the rural policy concerns, and especially broadband has been of interest. The roads issue has been of interest in the rural community. So I'll focus in on a few things like that. Next one. Then did just a generic report of the activities. We met 9 times last year, and the different things we did. So next one. And then I get philosophical at the end, and I said, you didn't ask me to fall in here, I'm going to tell you anyway. I don't think they recognize all the time you guys contribute to discussing some of the issues, giving people ideas and stuff like that, and occasionally sending a letter for support or question about something that's going on. They got to figure out some way to recognize it. This committee, maybe more so than any other committee, has really benefited from Ken and Regina being involved, and Ben also. And we, because it's somewhat rural in nature, we're meeting at an extension office, combining it with a mix every quarter downtown at the administration building. And so Ken and Regina especially have been carrying equipment around and doing all kinds of stuff forever. And so they're critical on that. I'm bringing up, we've had several issues and that's come up with using the hybrid meetings. Some of you weren't on the committee, but we got Zoom bomb. We asked the county what to do about that. We went to live streaming. You remember that meeting? You were out at the Veterans Memorial Park. We got in. Somebody was having problems. Ken called, and we had to ask for legal advice and they canceled the meeting. So all of you drove in from all over the county, and 10 minutes later we had to cancel it and go home. We've had problems with people responding on the hybrid meetings. I just wanted to know that, hybrid meetings are great. It gives people a chance to participate, but we've had the problems no matter who we've been. And a lot of it may be that some of the people who are trying to participate hybrid are out and don't have internet connectivity. So I just want to be aware of that. I'm asking if there should be some cross-pollination between the county advisory committees, conservation, economic development. They all relate to some of the tough stuff that we're doing in this committee as well. And then I wanted to stress the point that We got to make people understand the importance of boosters in rural communities and rural areas, because it's just more than contributions and employment. It's open space, it's wildlife habitat, it's water quality, it's flood control. There's lots of things, and we all have a responsibility to do that. So I didn't want you to go in, not having the opportunity to take a look at that. And I'm gonna try to keep it as short as possible. Of course, they can ask any questions. So, any comments on that?
That's good.
That's March 14th.
March 14th. And I'm not sure. 11:30, Ken? Is that
Meeting starts at 11:30, and these advisory items are usually pretty early in the meeting, so.
But there's no ever guarantee. So, anyway, wanted to let you know about that. Our next meeting, Ken and I have been working on, we're gonna go back to the broadband issue and have
Jim Woodard,
Jim Wood.
he's the broadband coordinator, works with Tommy Crosby in the Office of Management.
Okay,
So he'll be coming to speak.
so he'll be coming to speak to us on that. So any other questions or issues that you think we should bring up today?
I need to point out that the next meeting is scheduled on Grace Night for the committee's direction once a quarter. So Grace Night. March the. I want to say 21st.
21st, I think it is.
Yeah.
And remember, you got two choices, you got 2-hour parking. It's free. You can do the parking now for the sport, or however, it's in between. I hope we haven't had any problem for a long time since we got out of the worst of COVID and having a forum in attendance. I don't want to get back up like we did in early 1920, where we couldn't approve minutes. So Friday things, so if you can make every effort to try to do it. I know it may not be the most convenient, but that's the best alternative. If there's no other comments by the committee, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? We've gotten a little bit past.
I'm going to do general public comments.
Yeah. We'll take one more comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is, I will state the last name for this record, Taylor Robbins, and I was on the last meeting. I assume that there was some mix up, I think, in the prompts, so I wasn't allowed to get in. I was talking to Ken about it. But you guys made a motion. There was a presentation by Mr. McClendon about the slaughterhouse that's being proposed for overrun area. I'm highly opposed to that facility. And the fact that this board, I had some questions that I was going to call in about it, and I couldn't, and so I sent them. I think you all may have gotten them, the questions that I had. They have never been answered by anyone on staff. So I wish those questions could have been answered based on the information that was provided. So the letter, there was a letter that your chair generated, it was dated January 29th, and it was sent. You guys were provided a copy of it in your backup material. I thought you were going to approve it today, but apparently it already went to the Board of County Commissioners. They haven't put it on their agenda. So I'm going to read the letter that I was, and I will send it to the chair if you want. So for the record, in the letter dated January 29th, 2023, the Rules Concerns Advisory Committee, RCA, encourages the Alachua County VOCC to build a slaughterhouse in the county plan in Newberry State. It will also provide opportunities for vocational training and coordination with UF, Santa Fe High School Academy of Ag Science, and Eastside High School Institute of Culinary Arts. End quote. Has the RCAC consulted with and received written approval from the Alachua County School Board for this thing together? That's one of my concerns. Has this idea been reviewed and endorsed by the county attorney and risk management department? I mean, these are minor children that you're encouraging to support in a training program at a slaughterhouse. Virtually all high school students are minors under the age of 18. Federal regulation 29 CFR Chapter 57.61 prohibits minors under 18 from working in all occupations in a slaughterhouse. Florida statutes 450.061 paren 2 and paren quote, no minor under 18 shall be permitted to work in paragraph H, slaughtering, meat packing, processing, or rendering, end quote. I'm not a lawyer, but I believe it would be prudent to request the application Florida Statute 450.161, which allows minors to use dangerous machinery in school learning programs. There is an exception, and that's what this paragraph is. If, quote, that the work of the student learner and the occupation declared particularly hazardous shall be incidental to the training. End quote. So I don't know if that's what you think you're applying. The allowance for this is that it's incidental. And paragraph B, that such work shall be intermittent and for short periods of time and under the direct and close supervision of a qualified and experienced person. End quote. A slaughterhouse / meat cutting plant is 100% pure hazardous in nature. I expect no competent calendar school board attorney will try to argue that slaughtering / cutting is an incidental or intermittent operation in a full-time slaughterhouse. Your letter of January 29th, 2023 appears to advocate violation of state and federal child labor laws, which is a criminal offense. I'm asking you to please consider if you need to reconsider your actions. Thank you. And not only that, encouraging minors to work in a slaughterhouse or anyone is seriously detrimental to their emotional health. So I'm asking this board to reconsider that letter. I mean, it's a known, proven fact. The studies are there that people who work in slaughterhouses don't sleep well. So I'm disappointed that this board took that action. I think it was premature. I don't think you were given a comprehensive presentation on the facility, what it meant, but encouraging partnership with the culinary arts students at Eastside High School. I think that's a fine line, and it should have been approved by the school board to introduce that into the program. So thank you for your time.
Okay, any follow-up from the committee on that? Because the only question I think that I can directly answer is that there was no legal review of the letter. Would I be accurate in saying that, Ken?
That's correct. I mean, that's correct. It was copied to the county attorney, but we didn't ask for a review of the letter.
Okay, so that's the only question I'm going to answer most directly. And I guess just from my standpoint, based on the discussion that day, and we've discussed this other times in this committee, I don't think that we were suggesting that anything be done in terms of the employment of the students in the slaughterhouse. What it was is, and the relationship with the programs might be something along this line, and that line would be if a culinary program in the school wanted to do something with grass-fed beef with a different recipe, then the accessibility to the products there from the USDA certified operation. But that's all I can say. That would be my interpretation. I can tell you we appreciate it. I'll ask the committee one more time. Is there any interest at all of saying the committee's reconsidered and they're not in support of that? And I believe the vote on that was. Anything from the committee? Anything from Juan or Jeannie, input on that?
No comment, sir.
Okay,
No, sorry.
Ms. Werner?
I was remembering last meeting,
Mhm,
we discussed the slaughterhouse
mhm,
and the need for it
mhm.
was indicated that if we did not build this one here, that the farmers would have to truck their cattle to like 1, 2, or 3 counties over to the west to get them processed. And I've since learned that's not the case. And there is a slaughterhouse south of Lake City already here. So I don't understand.
We talked about Allen, that's Allen's processing, that's the only other nearest USDA plant. Yeah, we brought that up and I think they asked me where there's plants and Lake City has a USDA plant and Marion County has a USDA.
I don't know all that being brought.
Is there one up around Swanee, someplace to the north of Swanee?
Mommy meets in,
Okay.
North Carolina.
Because I did have a person ask me about it, they were slaughtered in a small amount, and they had to take it up, Swanee County area, and they couldn't get in. Yes. It was, sort of like this. So, say answer,
Yeah, I guess so.
okay. I want to remind everybody, we try to do this, especially since we're doing hybrid, and if you want to go back, the meetings are posted. So if you think anything's off slightly or something like that, or members falling, you can also.
I just wasn't convinced that there was a need for it. From what I have read and seems in no sense and talked to people about it.
It's an interesting concept. I've noticed there's been a couple of articles recently on media, and some people, the strong feelings on both sides.
Sure.
Any other comments before we go?
Mr. Chair, there is still a person online from the public and asked to.
Okay, Noel Mary, did you have anything you wanted to comment?
No comment.
Okay, thank you very much for being there today.
Thank you for having.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Been moved, seconded, any discussion? Not all in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, the same sign. Okay, that motion carries. We'll see people in March, and I think it's.